Good evening, and thank you for your patience in our tardiness this evening. The board now reconvenes this meeting of the Plano ISD Board of Trustees in open session at 7:27 p.m. on January 12th, 2016 at the Plano ISD Administration Building. I'm Nancy Humphrey, President of the Plano ISD Board of Trustees. On the board's behalf, I wish to extend a warm welcome to all who are here and to our video and web viewers. We will be conducting our meeting focusing on the district's two major goals: to ensure continued improvement in student learning and to ensure efficient use of financial and other resources. Please let me introduce my fellow trustees and staff. Seated to my left are Dr. Brian Bingley, Superintendent of Schools, Missy Bender, Board Vice President, Trustees Tammy Richards and Marilyn Hinton, Susan Modisette, Assistant Superintendent for Campus Services, and Dr. Jim Wusso, Assistant Superintendent for Academic Services. Catching my breath. Seated to my right are Carolyn Mobius, Board Secretary, Trustees David Stolley and Dr. Yoram Solomon, Dr. Carrie Cooper, Assistant Superintendent for District Services, Steve Fortenberry, Chief Financial Officer, Dan Armstrong, Assistant Superintendent for Technology Services, Carla Oliver, Assistant Superintendent for Government, Community, and Planning Initiatives, and Denise Gillespie, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent and Board of Trustees. I would like to thank the members of our Food and Nutritional Services Department for serving as greeters and for distributing the agendas and comment cards. At this time, please join us in applauding these staff members for their service this evening. At this time, I invite you to stand for the invocation to be led by Trustee Yoram Solomon. Following the invocation, we will remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, I will borrow and paraphrase. In our deliberation tonight, I ask that we get the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
The flag is over here. Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we will now move on to the recognition part of our agenda. Ms. Oliver, do we have student guests to be recognized this evening?
Thank you, President Humphrey. Yes, we do. We have one Boy Scout troop, number 259, if you would stand to be recognized. I see you back there. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And now I will move to agenda item 6 for the instructional focus, and the board will hear about the Meadows Elementary Urban Garden Project. I invite Susan Modisette to please introduce our campus representatives.
I am thrilled to. Before we begin, could I just ask everybody in the audience who's part of this, including the precious little girl with the aqua bow, but would you all of you who are here on behalf of the Meadows Garden, would you please stand and let us thank you for being here tonight? That includes your parents and family as well. Thank you all for being here. Thank you. This is probably one of the most inspirational and innovative projects that I've experienced in our district, and I would say this is something that goes beyond just one outstanding, dedicated teacher who had this vision and recognized some real potential for drawing in students and community, and it goes beyond community people who wrapped their arms around the school and literally rolled your sleeves up and helped build this in both a literal and a figurative way. It goes beyond when we talk about project-based learning. that's what this is at its very best. What has been created at Meadows, and it during the dedication was so aptly dedicated as BUG, which is Bartok's Urban Garden, and Jacob Bartok is the inspiration and mastermind behind this. I would really encourage you, if you have 5 minutes, to at some point swing by Meadows and experience what a phenomenal gathering place they have created. So at this time, I'd invite Sandy and Leanne to come forward and introduce our guests and share all the wondrous things you've done.
Thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to talk with you tonight about this project. Jacob Bartok is a 5th grade teacher at the school, and he came to me a couple of years ago with an idea to start a school garden. And when he said school garden, I thought he meant 5 petunias in a 3x5 flower bed. I had no idea the vision that he had, and what he has done for Meadows Elementary is nothing short of extraordinary. My vision for Meadows has always been for it to be the center of our community, a place where people gather in the best interest of children. Our garden has been just that. Under the guidance of Mr. Bartok, it has been a coming together of teachers, students, both past and present, families, and community volunteers. People were working in the garden in July for days on end when it was over 100 degrees outside. And they worked together recently to save the plants when temperatures dropped into the 30s. Mr. Bartok is going to explain the process of how the garden came together, but I wanted to thank this opportunity to recognize him for what he has done for the students at our school. As I saw the garden developing, I thought and thought and thought about how to thank him. How do you thank someone who spent countless hours working so hard, doing something so incredibly amazing? So as Susan said, we thanked Mr. Bartok by dedicating the garden to him last October at our Kick-Off the Year picnic, and we named it Bartok's Urban Garden, affectionately known as BUG. I also want to recognize the countless number of staff members and other volunteers who helped with the garden. Mr. Bartok's vision has become a reality, as the garden is used daily for lessons across the curriculum in science, math, health, and nutrition. So at this time, I invite Mr. Bartok to share with you how he made the urban garden a reality for our students.
So the idea of the urban garden came to me actually about 5 years ago when I was first becoming a teacher. And as a teacher, you're always looking for inspiration. So I was constantly looking on TED.com, looking up inspirational videos, and I came across a video about a teacher who started this school in Bali, India. And it was an entirely outdoor-based school, and they had videos of how engaged the children were, and everything they did, they learned hands-on, they learned life skills through building structures that they use within the school setting. And if something broke, they had to go back and figure out how to fix it and re-engineer that so it doesn't break again. So that really sparked my passion, and that's something I became extremely interested in as a teacher. Well, as we all know, I was a beginning teacher, so the stresses of being a beginning teacher kind of took over, and that dream of that outdoor classroom kind of got put on the back burner. Fast forward 3 years, and I'm now teaching 5th grade, and I had the opportunity to go to 5th grade Collin County Adventure Camp. And I recognized many of my students who were normally in a shell or very reserved. They became the leaders among their peers in a group in that outdoor setting, and they were allowed to showcase skills that aren't necessarily, they're not necessarily able to showcase inside a conventional classroom setting. That brought that outdoor school, that school in Bali back to me, and I really had a conviction at that time that I need to do something to provide that learning opportunity for kids all the time at Meadows Elementary School. So it was funny. A week passed, and then I was actually at the grocery store, and they were like, "Would you like to donate to the Whole Kids Foundation?" I was like, "Yes, of course, but what is the Whole Kids Foundation?" And they told me that the Whole Kids Foundation provides elementary schools grants to construct school gardens on their campus. So it was just this happened chance a couple weeks later that that opportunity presented itself to me. So I go to school the next day, super excited. I have pictures of other school gardens that had received the grant on the board. I talked to the kids about it, and they were just so excited about this idea of having a school garden on their campus. So we took a field trip outside. We went around the campus and we found this area you see here. It's on the west side of the building, and it was just a very underutilized area. No one went out there very often, but there was that one little bed there, and it was almost a sign that this is the area we need to construct a school garden. So once we found our prospect, the planning took place. For days on end, kids, they did research at home, they were creating Google documents, they were creating PowerPoints, all of what they wanted the school garden to become on our campus. So after we collected all these ideas, we finished up writing the grant and submitted the initial grant in October of 2013. Well, unfortunately, it was denied. Our grant was declined. So, like Winston Churchill once said, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And that's what we did. The following October, we applied for another Whole Foods grant. And in January of 2014, we were awarded that grant. And from that point on, a few weeks later, we received an additional grant from Lowe's, which doubled the scope in which we were going to be able to build this school garden. At that time, luckily for us, Christ Church came into our campus asking how can they support their community. And many members of their church happened to be involved in a Master Gardener program, so it was the perfect marriage between Christ Church and Meadows Elementary School. So after the planning was now the process. So after countless meetings, months of planning, and over 2 years since the original grant, we broke ground on July 16th. As exciting as it was to begin construction, it was July in Texas, which we all know means 100-degree heat. Most days we worked 2 shifts, one morning shift, 8 until 12, and then we worked an additional shift from about 5 until dark. All said and done, we moved 180,000 pounds of soil, rock, and dirt by wheelbarrow, as well as installing over 2,500 linear feet of lumber and using over 3,000 screws to construct the school garden. None of this would have been possible without the many people that were involved in the process. We had staff members, both former and current students, as well as members of Christ Church who spent countless days in blood, sweat, and there were some tears to make sure this dream became a reality for the students at Meadows Elementary School. And on a side note, if you ever need to do any sort of team building exercises, working in 100-degree heat will certainly bring a group of people together. Like I said, this garden wouldn't have been complete without all the community support. Whether it was financial support, gardening or construction advice, or pure manual labor, this garden would not have become a reality, and words can't express how much that means to Meadows Elementary and all the students who have been impacted by the community's generosity. And now at this time, I'd like to introduce my friend, Larry Holmes, to talk about Christ Church's involvement in the project.
Good evening. This was quite an experience for me also. I was sitting home minding my own business in March. And our missions outreach had just had a meeting with Sandy and her staff regarding what Meadows and Christ Church could do for Meadows. And one of that is Jacob's vision of a garden. So he basically called me up and said, I need you to help out. And this gives the opportunity to sit there and work on maybe putting a garden together. So I attended the next meeting and actually had a chance to meet Jacob for the first time and listen to his vision and what we could possibly do. We went outside, looked at the property that we were dealing with. It was on a raised bed, so we knew that a lot of filled dirt and other material went into that filling, so we couldn't really use the dirt itself. So we basically went to the raised beds concept. And I really wanted to do was drip line irrigation in the beds to minimize the water usage. We were very grateful of a contact through Texas A&M Extension Agency to work with the water savings, and they were very instrumental in. He hasn't mentioned this yet, but we got a 2,500 gallon rainwater collection tank there to help support that. So it was they were just really phenomenal in our assistance. But we're going to talk about the benefits, not only to the garden and to the students, but also the benefits that we basically had at Christ Church. This really gave us an opportunity to work with the staff at Meadows, which I feel is one of the best and most professional groups of people that I've ever had a chance to do it. The enthusiasm that they all had from the principal right down to all the teachers and the students, of course, were just amazing. This also gave us the opportunity at Christ Church to kind of reach out to our members to find out who might be interested in helping out. And we basically ended up with about a nucleus of about 14 gardeners, some with master gardeners backgrounds, others just basically backyard gardeners. And we again came together, and that we talked about the 100-degree heat. It was brutal, but everybody really hung in there, and it was amazing to me that we had 7 primary female teachers that were out there. You had Jacob and myself. We had 3 or 4 other male teachers that were there off and on, but the women basically were there all the time. And of course, we had a nucleus of several of the students there that came out every day also. And you'll meet our Terminator here in just a few minutes. He really got the nickname. But like I say, it gives us the opportunity to reach out and work with our people that were willing to teach and educate help educate the students on the growing plants and also on the nutritional value of fresh vegetables. It also gave us the opportunity here to take advantage of our youth organizations within the church, and they came over and actually spent days help moving the dirt that Jacob mentioned, but also building the beds and working side by side with the students there at Meadows, which was really outstanding. It also gave all of us that were working for Christ Church really the opportunity to use our God-given talents and gifts to interact with the staff, and it was just and continues to be rewarding to all of us. The most important of all is really the opportunity to work with the kids. They were just to see their smiling faces, the enthusiasm when we basically took a little radish sprout, cleaned it off, and have the kids taste it, and their amazement, it tastes like a radish, even though it's not a radish, it's a couple of leaves. And I know that they're out there tasting new vegetables every day. We'll also work being there actually when the kids come out during their class times. We're working with the teachers and watching them put databases together, working with and watching the plants grow, and also working and learning about the good and the bad insects that all gardeners experience. But I want to again thank the school and the staff for basically involving us, because I've learned an awful lot and had really an opportunity to meet a lot of very, very interesting people. And I feel like they're some of my best friends now. Thank you very much.
So the product, what do we have now, our finished product? We have a 3,200 square foot garden with 30 raised beds, so 800 square feet of growing area. It's all organic. Like Larry said, we have a 2,500 gallon rainwater harvesting system with slow drip irrigation. We also, if you notice, we have the row covers, which allows us to grow 12 months out of the year. And all of the material around the beds is decomposed granite. That way, any of our students that are utilizing a wheelchair are still able to navigate around the garden and experience the joys of the garden themselves. And of course, the pedagogy. That's why we did this. And the purpose of the garden, yes, it's nice to teach the kids about gardening, but that wasn't the purpose. The purpose was to embed hands-on, interactive, project-based learning for the kids to experience on a daily basis. And we've done everything from scatter plots to students creating their own scientific investigations based on different crops that they planted. Students come out and write poetry. The younger students are able to just simply find a plant that starts with the letter B. So there's numerous educational opportunities that the garden affords, and from my experience being in the garden with the kids, they love it. They're engaged, it's hands-on, and we also have a video here for you of one of our fitness teachers, Coach Cobb, doing a lesson with some of the students.
All right, guys, we're going to review what we've been learning in class on two-dimensional shapes and three-dimensional shapes. So first, raise your hand if you can tell me what shape this garden bed is. Dominique?
A triangle?
Think more. This is a three-dimensional shape because it's not flat.
Triangular prism?
Good, it's a prism, triangular prism. What's a vertex? Daniel?
Where two of the edges meet?
Okay, where they meet, so the corner. How many vertices on a triangular prism? All right, let's touch them. Don't forget it's not flat. Samuel, touch a vertex. 1, touch a vertex. 2, touch a vertex. 3, touch a vertex. 4, Jose. 5, can you think of where another one is? Now we got it. 6 vertices on a triangular prism. Good job.
And that's another thing I didn't mention. You know, most conventional gardens, most of the beds are simply square and rectangular. We have parallelograms, trapezoids, all sorts of different shaped beds, which was a learning experience in itself, just trying to figure out what angles to cut that lumber at to make those different shapes. So that, you know, that was a great learning experience for everyone involved as well. So now, what do the students think about the garden? I've talked a lot about it. Larry's spoken about it, how we feel about the garden, but really it's all about the kids. And if you notice in this bottom picture right here, there's a group of 24 fifth grade students who were invited to come out on our very first planting day. And it was scheduled for Saturday at 8 a.m. And when I pulled up at 7:30, there was already about 5 kids waiting at the gate to come help in the garden. And one of the parents actually told me when her son got in the car, he was like, "Mom, remember I have to be at school at 8 in the morning." She's like, "Yeah, right. You're not waking up." He was up before she was. He had set 2 alarms for himself, dressed himself, and made himself breakfast just so he could be there in the garden. So that was really a testimony to how meaningful this garden was to the students when 24 fifth graders come to school at 8 a.m. on a Saturday. And we also have a video of some of the students talking about what the garden means.
The reason I love going to the garden is because of the smell and the colors. We even got to write about strawberries and we even got to taste the garlic. I like going out to the garden because it's magical and beautiful. My favorite vegetables is tomatoes, carrots, and radishes. And about football, if I eat a radish, it just makes me so healthy and makes me throw better, good as I can. The reason I love going to our school garden is that it's a good opportunity for us to learn, and it looks really beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Bartok. Yay!
And at this time, I'd like to introduce Edgar Carlos, 5th grade student at Meadows Elementary. I have not met a more driven, passionate, or motivated student in my 7 years of teaching. So at this moment, I'd like to welcome Edgar Carlos to come and speak about the garden. Go give your speech.
So this speech is based on the school garden. It's what Mr. Bartok was just talking about, and I will begin my speech. I am Edgar Carlos, a 5th grader at Meadows Elementary. When I talk to people about the school garden, at first they seem uninterested. Now the students enjoy using their hands to learn. They learn things that they can use in their life. The garden allows us to be in a natural environment, which makes learning fun and exciting. It's a great chance from the classroom. I want you to know how hard I have been working to make the garden a beautiful place. When a friend of mine invited me to be part of the school garden, I had no idea of what I was getting myself into. The first time using the driller was complicated because I was afraid of poking my hand with it. But I decided to man up, and I received the nickname of the Terminator because I always wanted a job using the drill. Mr. Bartok, Larry too, and Stuart, these men are instinctively drawn to work their land in a passionate way. I feel thrilled to learn from them, since they had guided me to do things I wouldn't have think of. For instance, how to do dripping irrigation, build a perfect garden bed, and use power tools. I never thought by helping out in this garden I would end up following my dad's steps, but here I am, all inspired by the effort and courage of these people. Now, I wish you see the great value the garden has. It is not only about growing your own food, it is more of a gardening place where you can learn and feel inspired. How about you make gardening your new hobby? Come and plant with us.
Edward.
So where do we go from here? The initial build phase and initial use of different pedagogy in the garden, that's just the first step. Where I'll be attending along with Coach Cobb a Learn, Grow, Eat and Go Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Office curriculum training within the next week to help come up with different ways that we can embed gardening throughout the entire school on, a daily basis or anywhere that a lesson lends itself to. We're also applying for different grants to build an outdoor classroom. We'd like to have a 12-foot by 16-foot pergola with standing desks, whiteboards, to truly have an outdoor learning space for the students. And dreaming even larger, eventually we'd like to possibly take our crops to the farmer's market and teach kids business practices, how you sell a product, how you look someone in the eye and you shake their hand and you talk to them and you show how passionate you are about what you've done. Cooking classes, not only for the kids but for the parents as well, to incorporate the produce we're using in the garden, take that and use that at home. And we'd also like to teach the kids to reinvest in the community that's invested so much in them by donating some of our produce to local food banks, since the community has done so much for us. Teach our kids how to give back to those who have given to them. So at this time, I'd just like to thank you again for this opportunity. And Edgar Carlos has a special gift to you from Meadows Elementary School. From our garden, from the Meadows garden.
Isn't that beautiful? Wow, thank you for your gift to the board. That is beautiful. I know that I have fellow trustees that have comments, so I'm going to yield the floor.
Can I take this? I don't want to share. I love your nickname. I'm so glad you shared your experiences with us, how much fun it was for you. And I know it's just it's really interesting because I know, a lot of us won't necessarily think when we see the agenda item as, talking about the garden at Meadows. We don't realize how many different areas that can help in developing education and appreciation for our community. And I always love hearing when outside community members come in and help out and, not do everything, but, guide along the kids and the teachers, et cetera, through the process. So thank you for Christ Church, and thank you to Meadows, and thanks for getting up early in the morning and working.
Yeah, could they put one at Plano East? I have a senior who doesn't get out of bed.
Well, I just want to say that most of the board members already know that I used to teach at Meadows, as many of you, as the principal knows for sure. And when I taught Head Start, we started our own garden out there, and this reminds me very much of their experiences. And I remember bringing worms out to the garden and lots of different things, and the kids were so excited. But my favorite experience was the time when we first planted and the little leaves were just coming out, and the kids kept pulling them out saying, "Is it ready yet, Mrs. Hinton? Is it ready?" So we'd have to go back and plant everything all over again, because at 4 they weren't really sure whether it was ready or not. So it's really, really nice to see how this has really, really grown in the elementary school as well, and I'm so happy for all the kids. Thank you so much.
It has not been that long, relatively speaking, in this community's history when this city, this town, and the people who lived here were agrarian based, and people in the community, the land around where Meadows is now was farmed, and when every home had a garden just like this. And so I think I think it's happily ironic that you all are bringing that back into a now suburban environment. Two things that I noticed that I think are really inspiring out of this. One is that if you looked at your partners, you had 2 churches, you had private businesses, you had a 501c3, I guess, program, the Whole Kids program, you had a Boy Scout troop, and you had the school district all coming together to create something special for the school. And that's the second thing that one of you all mentioned, that the school being the center of the community. That's what makes communities from good to great. And when the entire community is vested in the school as the center of the community. And so I really applaud you all for doing that. This is a great idea. The question I have is, notwithstanding the blood, sweat, and tears component of it, what was the cost of the materials necessarily to you all. The question being, is this something we could replicate elsewhere? You know, I know we've got Education Foundation members here who might be interested in doing something like this. We've got the Whole Foods programs, and we might be able to replicate it elsewhere. But it really takes a visionary to drive that. So what was the overall cost? Do y'all have an idea?
The total budget?
Yeah.
We're pretty close to $19,000 right now.
Okay.
We basically started off with the position that Jacob mentioned. We also, which he didn't mention, that his father was a contractor, basically had donated both the landscaping materials, the lumber, and others, which were about $8,000. That corporation either paid themselves or had help from their contractors. So that's something that was which really put us into putting the garden together. Without that support, it would been very, very difficult.
But I think I would venture to say that we have a lot of communities who have people just like that who would want to help. And so, you know, sometimes I think from my perspective as a board member, sometimes I get a little too caught up in, okay, thinking of the reverse, thinking of, well, I've got to get the money to do something and then we'll figure out what to do. Sometimes you have to have the vision first and the rest will come. So I applaud you. Very fantastic.
We put the plan together, and initially it was around about $15,000 just to get started. And then I figured out how much materials that we actually needed. That's really kind of gave us the idea that something we could really do. And we didn't have to do as big a spread if we didn't have the money. So we basically had the vision what we wanted it to build on in future seasons. Fortunately, we had people that did come out and give us the support that we needed in order to accomplish what we have today.
You know, I think we do have another school, the Amy Wilson Middle School has a garden that was begun like this, and it was through a Grants to Educator grant that they began that, and I think their number was much lower, but perhaps it's because of the, like you said, the filter and the building materials, the surface that you're building on. My guess is it would be a little less expensive for a project that's just built on the regular ground. But
Garden would be much less expensive.
right, but that is an amazing garden, and the kinesthetic learning, the taking the kids out of the classroom and giving them the opportunity to blossom in their own way. I think that's really wonderful, and the community involvement is just amazing. I echo what you said about the different organizations. So thank you for bringing this to us tonight. I think you had another comment.
Yeah, I just, you know, we hear about all kinds of wonderful experiences at each campus, and what you are demonstrating to us here is possible. There's some key success factors here. You had a vision as a teacher. You were inspired, and you know, saw the value of this way to touch students to improve their learning by changing how they learn and reaching them in ways that you couldn't otherwise reach them. And you, as the principal, had the fortitude or the leadership capabilities to allow the teacher to go there, and the trust. So that combination is so valuable. And so that says to me, you're hiring the right kind of people on your campus, because that's the kind of teacher that I want to see on our campus, doing that for young people like we've just heard from here. So I'm really happy to see that, and I hope that that happens, you know, at every campus, that they are inspired, because your inspiration, I'm sure, was contagious to you, and it was contagious to you, and it sold all these partners to buy in, and all the kids and their parents to buy in also. And I love that. When we talked about rebuilding Meadows a decade ago, we were talking with the city at that time about how can we make this a community school, and potentially using our assets together to build the school in a way that met the needs of the community. Well, we weren't able to get really far down the road with that particular line of conversation, but you did it anyway. You found what you needed, the way that the community could value this. The other thought that comes to my mind is this is a makerspace. This is how your campus has interpreted what makerspace can mean for you. So you know there's money there. That
They're doing that also.
Okay, they're doing that too. Okay. I was just going to say, maybe you interpret, this opportunity to access funds that way. But that's great too if you're doing, that in your library or some other space. But I kind of view this as a part of that vision as well. It's hands-on learning. So, I love this kind of thing. So thank you for partnering, and keep that vision going. Keep that inspiration coming.
I just want to say thank you. When I visited Meadows and you guys say, hey, you want to see the garden? Sure. That is an engineering masterpiece. So, I beg to differ. You say everybody used to have gardens. No, everybody didn't used to have gardens like that one. But anyway, I just want to say thank you. I mean, the passion that day was just as evident out there standing amongst the garden as it is right here. And it's genuine and it makes a difference for kids. And I just want to say thank you for that from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. That was a really amazing presentation. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is item number 7, and I invite Carla Oliver to introduce the recognition for this evening. Ms. Oliver?
Thank you, President Humphrey. It's that time of year, as we normally have in January. It's School Board Recognition Month, and across the state, boards are being celebrated, and of course we are happy to join the other districts in saying thank you to our Board of Trustees. Your dedication and willingness to serve as advocates for our children is very evident in your daily work, and certainly the work that you're doing this evening. It's worthy of celebration. So at this time, I invite you to take a look at the gifts that are at each of your places that we all shuffled under the table right when you came in. We'll take just a moment for this, but it's worth looking in the bags for. And I'm going to continue to talk while you ferret around the bags. Literally drawing inspiration from this year's school theme, Make Your Mark. Art students and teachers at 22 campuses across our district illustrated one-of-a-kind coloring books for each of you. Students created images to honor the mark that you as school trustees have made on our district. They're not even listening to me.
We just want to share that everybody wants to sing. Aren't these adorable?
They really are great. Leading this effort was Laura Grunler, our district visual arts coordinator, who worked with campus art specialists and students. And we hope that you cherish these remarkable mementos of your service on the school board. Also included in your gift bags, don't overlook this part, are French macaroons prepared by the talented young chefs at the Culinary Arts Program at Plano East, who worked under the direction of teacher Lois Conwell, who we all know. And last but not least, come on up, Leslie, it's okay. And last but not least, the Plano ISD employees have written special messages of thanks on the sign that adorns the front of the table tonight for you. So before you leave tonight, please take a moment to take a quick look. It's on the screen for you now to see. In the handprint or thumbprint, there are inspirational messages and messages of thanks. And I think most of us know what we wrote, so we're expecting you to find our comment. That's just a joke. So at this time, I would say thank you so much for your vision and leadership as advocates for public education and ensuring that today's students are prepared to be productive citizens and leaders of tomorrow. And so I ask our audience to please join me in a round of applause for all that you do on behalf of students.
Hey.
Thank you for indulging that. Certainly you're welcome to make comments, but we just wanted to celebrate you.
Okay, best gift yet.
I know, this is adorable, I love it. And does it come with a budget that we can color?
I will
macaroons
say I
are
was
great.
envious when all of this was coming forward, and then we kind of did a look today, and I'd like to compliment Brittany Esri, a part of our team, was a primary component, and I've already mentioned Laura Grundler. So everyone was excited about this gift. So we think it's one of the best gifts ever, too.
I think so.
So, and
It's
I
so
don't have a
creative.
coloring book, and sorry, Dr. Bingley, I don't think you do.
I don't have a
So-
color. That's okay.
But anyway, thank you so much.
Well, I think that all of us agree that we enjoy the work we do. It's a calling. But I think that the coloring book is about the most creative thing you could come up with Make Your Mark. That is adorable. Thank you so much. Is anybody else? I didn't mean to cut anybody
The
off.
macaroons are really good.
It's my daughter's favorite cookie.
Oh my gosh.
She's going to be jealous.
I just want to say that I think this district makes it fun for January to come forth. And something for us to look forward to, but we really do appreciate our community. I mean, we have the best community ever, and we just love you.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to agenda item number 8, which is our regular public comment portion of our agenda. For the public comment portion of our agenda, the board has public comment cards that are accepted from 6 to 7 p.m. Cards are not accepted after 7 p.m. and are not transferable to another party or speaker. All cards will be collected and given to Carla Oliver or a representative of the communications department who will present the speakers during this time. Ms. Oliver, do we have speakers that desire to give comment this evening?
We do. We have 4 speakers, and they are about agenda items.
Okay, all right, then I'll read on. Pursuant to board policies BED local, BED legal, and BED exhibit, the board may place reasonable restraints on the number, length, and frequency of presentations so long as it does not unfairly discriminate among speakers based on their viewpoint. The board is not authorized to discuss or act on the public's comments or complaints if the subject is not on the agenda. If a member of the public or the board inquires about a subject for which notice has not been given, the board may only make a statement of specific factual information, recite existing policy in response to the inquiry, or refer the person to a staff person for more information or assistance. If the subject of the public comment card or public comment is already on the agenda for the meeting, the board may invite the speaker to stay until the board reaches that topic on the agenda. 30 minutes have been allotted to hear persons who desire to make comments to the board. Persons who wish to participate in this portion of the meeting shall complete the appropriate public comment form before the meeting begins and indicate the topic about which they wish to speak. No presentation shall exceed 3 minutes. Delegations of more than 5 persons shall appoint 1 person to present their views to the board. Ms. Oliver, I will turn to you to please introduce the speakers.
Thank you. Again, we have 4 speakers, and I'll just call all of you if you'd like to stage and bring your comments forward or know when you would be invited. First, we'll be led off by George Flint, followed by Ken Galliano, followed by Mark Reed, followed by Mike Bronski. So, Mr. Flint, thank you. Please step to the podium. The microphone is for you.
Thank you very much. I don't know that I need the
Wait, can we wait a second?
I'm sorry, you're the timekeeper? Do
Yes,
you
I
need-
just want him to make sure he knows. Hi.
Okay, and she'll let you know when you've come to.
Just throw something at me.
Oh, okay.
We have cookies.
Stop. No, I'm not getting rid of this. I'll give, George, I'll go like this when you have 30 seconds left. Is that okay? Okay. Yeah, okay.
So 3 minutes, I'm sure I'll get under that.
Okay.
I believe that I will be addressing, actually probably the last item on the agenda, which is the final report of facilities, which I'll euphemistically call a bond issue. But I want to start off by, first of all, saying my name is George Flint, and I'm a longtime resident of Plano. One time thought about running for the school board, but was scared to death that it would overwhelm my business also a member of Christ Church. And so I was very proud to hear the report. And it reminded me really of what may very well be the most important lesson for our young people today. And that is to realize connections. Because many people don't. They don't understand the fact that to plant seed means you reap a harvest. But what is also taught in that is that to have a harvest, you have to plant a seed. And I am politically connected. I am the chairman of the Collin County Republican Party. And as a result, I do have insight into the electorate, or at least the electorate that I talk to often, which quite frankly is a lot. And I can tell you something about the electorate, and that is they're angry. You can hear that in the presidential debates. You can hear that in discussion. And what are they angry about? They feel like government has failed them. They feel like government has lied to them. They feel like government is incompetent. They feel a number of things. And so since that is the fruit, since that is the harvest, I have to ask myself as an observer, what was the seed? What began that process? And I just would like to talk to you for a minute as a business person and how things are packaged and how things are talked about. And I know that the issue with respect to the bond is whether we present a unified front to the public or whether or not we break it apart. What drives that decision? I would suggest to you what drives that decision in part is a unappreciation of the electorate in terms of its decision-making capability. And that what has happened over the years, as government has not trusted the electorate, we've tended to do things that don't let the electorate figure them things out themselves. My recommendation to you, and I know I'm short on time, is simply to break apart the bond issue. Make the case.
3 minutes.
Thank you. Make the case. You'll be surprised at the result. Thank you.
Mr. Galliano?
So Ken, same thing, if I do that 30 seconds before.
First of all, is this on?
You're on.
So my name's Ken Galliano, and I also live in Plano, and I was really hoping I would not go after George. I just wanted to talk to you about it. At the beginning of this process, there was something called the Future Initiatives Academy, which I thought was a fabulous idea and was really passionate about. And that was actually pulled from the bond being discussed about in this bond package because it was a snag in the agreement between Collin College and the school district, understandably. But that was a fairly developed idea compared to the Art Center, which is what I want to talk about. I'm not up here to say I'm against the Art Center. What I'm here to say is I think it's an idea in its infancy. We don't know where it's going to go. We don't know what it's going to look like. There has been an architect, and the estimates for what it's going to cost could vary widely. And based on that, you know, if it's packaged all together here and we overspend on it, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pulling from the money that's going to go for the elementary school renovations and the new carpets and the HVAC. So I guess my question up here to you right now is, why rush? Why not get it right? Why not go get these answers? There's nothing keeping me from coming back in another 18 months from now with these answers, both for the Arts Center and for the Future Initiatives Academy. So I guess my question or my statement is, you know, take a look at it, come to us with a full picture. That we'll get a lot more support.
Mr. Mark Reed?
Mark, so I'll do the same thing. Uh-huh.
At 30 seconds.
Yeah, he knows.
I'm Mark Reed. I'm a 20-year resident of Plano, and we have an excellent school district. And I appreciate everyone that serves on the board. I know it's a tremendous drain on your time. I know you have a passion for it, but it's to be commended, and I thank you for doing that. As I said, we have an excellent school district, but the citizens need to be trusted
Mr. Mike Bronski.
Ms. Oliver, I'm not sure quite how you arranged it so that I would be able to sum up many of the core maybe they spoke.
Is that an I'm sorry or you're welcome?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
So Mike, you know when I raise my hand, you do have 30 seconds left. Just no, I'm keeping those. I make it
Well, first
clear.
of all, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for each of you and the time and effort that I know you put in, and I've watched you put in over the many years to serve our community and to help our children. I've had two young sons graduate from TISD. And as I was reading, I'm going to also talk about the bond proposal. President Humphreys made a comment on the PISD website about the commitment that we're making to effectively and efficiently manage every tax dollar. And from the bottom of my heart, I'm so thankful that we have you as president, Missy as our vice president, and Carol as our secretary leading this direction. Because I do believe that each of your hearts are toward being very effective and very efficient. In saying that, I want to make sure that as we look at borrowing money, that we decide what our needs are versus what our wants are. And in that, we also, just like David said, we allow the community to come together and we find momentum of support. I really liked it when you said something along the lines of, you don't have to get the money first and then do something. And I really think, although I really like the Arts Center and I think it's a great idea, I don't want the Arts Center to turn into something like the water fountain did in 2008 for the city of Plano. And I think that if we give the voters a chance to be able to understand all of the details once we have them together, and once we have a solid vision to lead it forward and present to the voters, I believe absolutely they will support it and will get behind it. But I don't really believe tucking 15% of the total bond package in with the rest of it being taking care of buses, taking care of roofs and things like that is necessarily the best idea. So I would just like to ask and suggest that maybe we take a step back, follow Trustee Soley's idea of allowing the whole community. I know in the Dallas Morning News on January 8th, there were several community groups that were suggesting how great of an idea this was. Let's gather together a full vision to be able to present that forward. Thank you all very much for your time, and again, thank you for your hearts and service every day.
Thank you. Is that the last of our speakers? Thank you all for being here this evening and coming forward to speak. We appreciate that. All right, now we'll move on to agenda item 9, and we will address the consent agenda, which includes personnel recommendations, minutes of previous meetings, bids, purchases, and construction items. Are there any requests from a board member to remove an item from the consent agenda for further discussion? I can't talk, discussion. I'm at my limit of words. All right, as there is no item to be pulled, may I please have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Was that Marilyn? Okay, thank you, Marilyn. And then Yoram, second. And there is no discussion, so I will call for a vote, please. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, and the motion carries unanimously. All right, thank you. We will move on to agenda item 10A, and I need to switch pages. And the board will first announce its decision regarding an appeal heard in closed session prior to this business meeting. Currently, the time is 8:28, and the board adjourned into executive session to conduct a level 4 hearing pursuant to sections 551.074 and 551.0821, and to consult with its attorney pursuant to sections 551.074 and 551.071. Following executive session, the board has now reconvened into open session. In accordance with Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code, any action regarding this matter must be taken in open session. Board members, do I have a motion on the level 4 appeal?
I move that the board deny the level 4 appeal.
All right, I have a motion made by Missy Bender. Is there a second? All right, I have a motion on the table made by Missy Bender, seconded by David Stolley, excuse me. Is there any discussion on this motion? All right, I will call for a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And there are 6, is that right? 6 votes. And all of those opposed, please raise your hand. And are you abstaining? Okay. You are reminding me. I totally apologize. I forgot you were not present. My apologies. So the motion carries unanimously with 6 votes in favor. And I totally forgot that Tammy was not there. She was at the later meeting. All right, we will then move on to, whoops, I've got to go back to my other pages, pardon me. Let me out of order. We did the appeal. Agenda item 10B. And I will call on Ms. Oliver to present the 2016 and 2017 instructional calendar draft.
Thank you. I'd like to remind you, back in December, we brought to you 2 different calendar drafts, and those are on the screens for you to see now. The first draft offered, let me first say, we based the calendar drafts essentially on the school year that we currently have in place with the features of the current calendar, primarily. So the first draft is that calendar almost exactly to a T, reflecting 3 waiver days. And then we also offered a second draft that reflected a 4th waiver day built in for your consideration. And then at the time that the board talked about this in December, you directed me, as in your consideration, would we please bring back a calendar that reflected the consideration of 9-week grading periods. So I've done that as well, and that was directed and asked for the calendar that had the 4th waiver day built in. So that's what you see here. So what I wanted to share with you this evening is, first, you may have comments about this particular process and such, and it's a timely discussion. Most districts around us are beginning, or either beginning, in the middle of, or having completed this kind of discussion. So I'll be happy to yield the floor for any comments that you have, but I would like to share one piece of information with you. And I've skipped around in my notes, so I wanted to, let me jump here. So again, these 3 calendars have been a part of your board study for this board meeting tonight. But I would like to mention that since creating these 3 drafts, more buzz is about the community and in the state right now about calendars and the development of a calendar based on the concept of 75,600 minutes. And so we've talked about those as this legislation was developing, and we knew that this was a possibility. And so what I would like to do, certainly, again, yield for any comments that you may have or questions, but we would like to work on a creative approach to that legislation as it's now being interpreted, and maybe bring back a 4th option for you to consider, and then we'll see where we are. But I'll leave that for you to tell me, but right now that would likely be my recommendation.
Okay, do more board members have any comments about the first 3? And I know that we have the opportunity for the administration to come back with a even more creative calendar after this meeting for us to consider. Any comments in February? Any other comments here right now? Questions?
Can we conclude that, Susan, through your study, that you found that the grading period change is beneficial?
We're still early. We're meeting again this month, but absolutely the first blush by everybody has been very much in support. So I anticipate that we'll be moving in that direction, and we'll come back to you as soon as we have, as soon as we've examined it thoroughly.
I certainly like the idea of, seeing if there is latitude in the minutes program, or at least if there's not latitude, we want to exercise at least being compliant
right
with it.
And it is a compliance issue. Thank you for mentioning that. It gives us the opportunity to be proactive, to consider, to make sure that we're compliant in all the different areas. And you may come back and choose a more traditional approach as we've done, but not without the full knowledge of what we currently have to work with. And as that information is coming, we'll put something together for you before the February meeting. If you choose to postpone that adoption tonight.
So just to be clear, I guess what you're studying, when you say it's a compliance issue, you want to make sure that these 3 calendars work with the 75.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And if there's any flexibility to be gained through the new interpretations of that legislation.
Okay.
Now, they didn't to be clear with our audience, you guys know this because we've been talking about it, it did not touch that 4th Monday start in August.
Yeah.
But other flexibilities that may come as a result of the minutes approach versus days.
So
and
are you flexibility in the way of extending days and building in additional off days? Okay.
Correct.
All right, so I don't think we have any action then to take on this item. I think we can postpone the discussion until February, and Carla, you said you'll come back to the board at the regular meeting with
all of our work.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for taking the time.
I'm just going to throw this one out here just because I raise it every time on the calendar. As a reminder that the start from August to Thanksgiving, our kids go with no break. So if we are extending days and building in a break, I would suggest somewhere in that time frame.
In the desert?
I have my book from last year.
Also good for the seniors wanting to do college visits. But I will say, I hope we're thoughtful about extending the day. For those high school kids who start with 0 hour at 8 a.m. and don't leave their various practices until 7 p.m., I struggle to think how we could make their day any longer.
I understand, thank you.
And the Thanksgiving is still a hit.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I will say the anecdotal feedback I received, and maybe some others in this room received, that it was all thanks for the week.
All right, thank you, Carla. We'll move on to agenda item 11A, and just before I ask Steve Fortenberry to introduce our next agenda item, which is the final report of our Facilities and Technology Task Force, I'd also like to recognize the task force chaired by Rebecca Eggleston-Caso and express our sincere thanks for the members of that task committee. They've spent a lot of time, and thank you to that committee from the board for their hard work. Since early September, the members of this task force have dedicated their time and attended, I believe, 9 meetings where they gained an understanding of the facility and technology needs of the district. The task force members have each spent countless hours studying the overview of the district, bond indebtedness and its capacity, demographics, historical additions, renovations, modifications, and additions to facilities, the overview of systems and compliance, and the district's technology needs. No small feat. All of this information was studied and considered within the framework of the district's strategic plan in mind. I'd like to remind board members that we will hear the report from the task force tonight and may ask clarifying questions. However, we have called a special called meeting on January 19th in order that the board members may have the opportunity to study the recommendation and more fully discuss and be prepared to fully discuss that in the meeting on January 19th. So all of that being said, I will please turn this over to Steve Fortenberry to introduce Ms. Eggleston-Caso.
Thank you, Nancy. And you said a lot, most of what needed to be said.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. So if you are a committee member or task force member, and I see at least 4 that are here tonight, if you would, please stand. You as a board appointed a great group of people. I believe there's a total of 29. They were very diverse in their thinking, and lots of good discussion and comments and ideas. So it was a much larger group than we've normally worked with. I think it was much more representative of the district than a smaller group in the past might have been. So it's a great group. So that I don't forget, though, I'd like to also mentioned a few of our staff members who attended every meeting and worked a lot in between, and even for the last year or so in putting together some of the information that the task force considered. Mary Ann Lewis and Monica are not here tonight, but both did a lot of work behind the scenes in getting things organized. Also Juan Ramos from Facility Services and Tony Pearson, who assist him, were present at the meetings and did lots of work. Kathy Wasco is the one that keeps us straight with our bond accounting. Tells us when we're wanting to do something that we can't do out of bond funds, but really does a great job working with facilities and keeping all that we do straight and very organized, and reports right at her fingertips. And of course, Linda Madden has been through more than one of these, and very knowledgeable and very helpful. So thanks to all of the staff that has participated over the last half year and even beyond that. So with that, Rebecca was a great chairperson. She managed to keep 29 people moving forward, and so at this time I'd call on Rebecca to give the report, final recommendations.
Rebecca, as you're coming up, can I suggest, I mentioned 9 meetings, some of them might have qualified for like a meeting and a half, so we might be in double figures, but I would echo what Steve said before. I just, was very thankful for the thoughtful work and the dialogue, and it was a positive experience in allowing people to really kind of dig in and be a part of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bingley. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to present the final report for the Facilities and Technology Bond Task Force. Since we were already expressing thanks, I also want to thank the members of the task force. This was a passionate and committed group of citizens that represented very broad perspectives within Plano ISD. And so I appreciate those who are here for attending tonight as well. I also want to thank Dr. Bingley, Mr. Fortenberry, the cabinet and staff. Yes, we had 9 meetings, but the lion's share was on them to provide a tremendous amount of information that we requested over that period. So thank you all. As Mrs. Humphrey said, since September of 2015, the Facilities and Technology Bond Task Force has studied the capital needs of the district. During its meetings, the task force received input from the district regarding all aspects of its operations. The task force also received reports and analysis on projected attendance and enrollment, the debt levels and structure, financing options, and tax rate implications. The task force conducted, since we presented our interim report in November, we conducted a public hearing on December 17th of 2015. At that time, we had over 100 citizens come to provide feedback on the proposed projects. At that time, we had 25 citizens speak and an additional 4 present written comments. Following many hours of study and discussion, the task force took into consideration the information provided by the district as well as the key stakeholders and citizens as we deliberated the final recommendations that we present tonight. We recommend, and I will not provide detail because it's in your packet, which provides extensive information about those projects, but I do want to say that we are proposing $524,725,000 to be included in a bond election in May 2016. A summary of the projects is included in your packet that you have with you tonight. I would like to point out that the list includes the performing arts venue in the early childhood school that you asked us to consider after you discussed and reviewed our interim report. I would also point out that the list includes the 6 turf programs that we had submitted in our interim report, and we respectfully request you to reconsider those projects as well. Finally, the task force was charged with analyzing the district's outstanding debt structure and incorporating proposed new debt in a manner that will have minimal impact on taxpayers. The task force considered these funding options, and there were 3 of them, and they are also included in your packet. On behalf of the task force, I want to thank you for allowing us to serve the district, and we wish you best wishes for your deliberation and final consideration and decision on my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for being here this evening and for leading the committee through the process. I know it can sometimes be, when you've got a group that size, it can be like herding cats, but the effort that everyone put forward is amazing, and we truly appreciate the work of the task force, and I know our board is going to study this. Mr. Fortenberry, were you going over any more of the details, or are we?
No, ma'am, we did not plan to, and
Okay.
we'll have full discussion of those a week from tonight.
Okay, right. So that, and I felt like that was really important, that we did have a meeting after you gave your final approval, so that the board members, or your recommendation, so that the board members could review and soak it all in and make very good decisions. And we've heard speakers come forward this evening, so all of that information our board members will take into consideration, and we will discuss. We will have a public meeting on January 19th. It's open, it's an open meeting, but it does not take public comment. It's a work session. That's basically where we roll up the sleeves and have a board discussion. So with that, I will move on to, and thank you, I will move on to agenda item 11B. And again, I will call on Steve Fortenberry, and this time he will present the interim budget report. Steve?
Thank you again, Nancy. This is one of our very preliminary discussions of the upcoming 16-17 budget. At this meeting, we'll talk about our key assumptions and our preliminary projections for both revenues and expenditures, but we'll restrict the discussion to the operating fund at this point. So it'll be a fairly brief presentation. The key budget assumptions, of course, this is not a legislative year, so we don't have to guess at what legislative changes might be. There could be a court decision, but following the court decision, the legislature will eventually have to reconvene to come up with a new formula if the lower court ruling is upheld. So at this point, we're still dealing with current law with no projected changes in that law for the 16-17 school year. Our demographer in doing his work, and he'll be presenting a more detailed report in February, but his projections reflect a decline of about 153 students. You might recall that's primarily because our elementary grades are coming in with less students than the outgoing grades at the senior high level have been for the last 3 or 4 years, and as that happens, we are getting some growth within the community, but not enough to replace the normal decline in students as our class sizes are becoming smaller. We are presuming at this point property value growth of 5%. The growth in the past 2 years has been between 6 and 7%. Could be some slowdown in that, but we think at least for the next year or two we'll continue to see some good growth in our property values. And since the tax ratification election 3 years ago, we are at the max of $1.17 for our M&O rate, and so we project no changes in that. And I'll point out in a minute for the audience why, with property value growth of 5%, there's some thought, well, why don't you reduce the tax rate? But you'll see that school districts are very unique. We don't get to keep that tax-based growth. But we'll show some numbers on that in a second. So with those assumptions, as we look at our revenue budget for next year, kind of broke this into some major categories to simplify it. Property taxes, we would see an increase from $472 million to about $496 million. That reflects that 5% growth in the property values. With state aid funding, about a $5 million increase. We do get some state aid despite the fact that we pay much more than we get back to the state in terms of recapture. We do get to keep a constitutional per capita amount. TEA, or the state board, establishes that amount each year. This year it was lowered as they needed more money to fund the instructional materials allotment. They have told us it will be going back up next year because they don't need as much money in the second year of the state's biennium. And so we're projecting that we'll benefit from that with an increase in state aid. We're holding the budget at this point for all of the other revenue sources steady at about $43 million. So our total revenues before we make our recapture payment to the state would actually reflect about a $30 million increase from $537 million to $565. But then when you back out the recapture amount, that's the money that we pay sent back to Austin. The increase there, our calculation is that will be going up $38 million. Recaptures, there's a 1-year lag on it, so that almost 7% property value growth that we had this current year, that goes into the recapture calculation next year, and that's the reason that that payment jumps from 61 million to 99 million. As Nancy pointed out in the discussion earlier, if you look at our total revenues of 565, well, if you look at our total property taxes of 496 million, over 1/5 of that goes back to the state in terms of recapture. So that's the boat we're in. So if you net all those out and compare the 2 years, you see that we're projecting a decline of a little under $10 million, $9.7 million for the next budget year. That's on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, so don't panic. Let's look at the expenditure side first. Our baseline budget's about $536 million. Some of the known factors, and there's lots of other known factors, but much smaller numbers, but our increase in recapture will be going up again by $38 million. At this stage of our budget, we normally put placeholders in for a compensation increase and then any other increases. We really are at the preliminary stages of working through the budget. We'll be sending out requests to schools and departments shortly. This is really to get a picture of, in general, is it a budget we're going to worry about from the outset, or is it one where things should kind of fall in place? And you'll see in a minute, things should kind of fall in place overall with this one, to where there should be money for increased compensation, and we should have some other available funds for some other items. If you recall, back in November, when we looked at the budget goals, one of those goals was to strategically target additional resources to the high needs campuses. And so some of that $2 million that you see under other increases, we are in the preliminary stages of formulating ideas on that we'll be bringing to you later in the spring, and a lot of those will be geared towards meeting that goal. We have, ever since the TRE passed 3 years ago, we have transferred funds out of the operating fund to the capital projects fund. As we pull that $14 million out that is budgeted this year, this is assuming that we have the bond election in May. It's for the time being assuming that that's successful and that we have a source for capital projects other than our surplus transfers. Then we would discontinue paying that after this year from the operating fund. So that leaves us with expenditures of $567.5 million. If we back out the recapture, so we're comparing apples to apples, that leaves us with a net expenditure amount of about $468 million. So when you summarize those, revenues at 466, expenditures at 468, there would be a slight potential deficit with the budget. I'll show you a couple of reasons that is not a worry at this point. I'd point out that the $1.9 million deficit with this preliminary look is a little less than 1/2 of 1% of the total expenditures, so a little tweaking and we could take care of that. One of the things that we look at each year is how did our actual expenditures stack up against the budget? And if you look historically, particularly in that middle column that shows our expenditure variance, you see a pretty consistent 2% or so. Dr. Bingley's talked to us about, let's see if we can tighten that down a little bit more. We are very, I'd use the word conservative in our estimates to make sure that we aren't caught short. And so we may be tweaking some things a little bit more than we have in the past. But historically, we've had 2% of our budget that we don't spend. I think it's a good sign that just because it was appropriated, if we don't need it, then we don't spend it. The revenue variance is a little tighter, but it's also a little more variable. When we're adopting the budget, we're adopting it in early June, and it's based on the preliminary property value statement from the appraisal district. Generally, they're also conservative, and so when we come back and revise the budget, when we get the certified tax roll, we usually see a little bit of an increase there. The other fallback that we're fortunate to have is our fund balance. This gives you a 10-year fund balance history, and even if we were to incur a $1.9 million deficit, we'd still be at 29% of the following year's projected appropriations. The board policy says that we strive to maintain 20%, so we'd still be well above that. So all this just to give you a preliminary look at. We certainly looked through the budget for ways to save money. In fact, one of the savings that we have is about $400,000 on our fuel costs for our buses because of a new contract we entered into. But it's not the type of budget that most of you went through in 2011 where we were trying to find $30+ million to pull out of the budget. So that's our preliminary look. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Steve, I really applaud that you are looking at the extra money to help the targeted campuses, and although $2 million is a lot of money, when you divide it up by the 12 campuses, it's about $160,000, so that's 3 full-time equivalents on schools that could have some tremendous needs. So I hope we can continue to look hard at the needs of those campuses, and it may take more than 3 people at the schools.
As you're moving forward in the calendar process and bringing reports to us on a frequent basis, could we have some conversation in maybe the an upcoming meeting about general priorities or areas of extra, I mean, you mentioned an extra focus. I mean, are there sort of some categories that we can make sure that on the front end we've expressed to you and get your feedback on so that we don't walk down the road and look back and wish we had had that conversation?
Yeah, I think we certainly could. As I understand it, the February work session is very full. It may be we will have a budget presentation there, but it's one of the normal ones we do that shows our comparisons to other districts and then how we've been trending. We could maybe have some brief discussion at the end of that, or if there's other items individual board members have an interest in that you'd like to communicate with us, that would be fine.
Perhaps as a starting point, if as a cabinet you could have the conversation, you probably already had it,
Right.
to say these are the top 3, areas of priority for us, and bring that to us, and then we could either validate that or modify it.
Yeah, I would suggest you that process has been underway, and it will continue to be refined. The budget will move along with the discussion of priorities, and those things will kind of be coming together. So yeah, I would have no problem with wanting to do that. I see Susan shaking her head. We just even Monday were engaged in some of that conversation about thinking, this is very preliminary, of course, but it doesn't mean we aren't thinking right now about outside the dollars, what is it that we want to accomplish and how do we get there? And sometimes that's funding, sometimes it's thinking differently, sometimes it's repurposing efforts. Yes.
I've noted that, Missy. Thank you.
I'm sure you're talking about it. I just would enjoy coming along for the ride.
All right, any other further questions about the preliminary budget? All right, I will then have us move along to agenda item 12, which is policies, district policy. At most of our regular meetings, we have policies on the agenda for the board's consideration. These policies have undergone prior review by the district's attorney and by each board member. I invite Carla Oliver to introduce the policy for this evening, or policies.
Yeah, it's really one or the other, considering it's an update.
Yeah.
Thank you, President Humphrey. TASB Localized Policy Manual Update 103, affecting local policies, is presented for adoption tonight under second reading. It is recommended that the board add, revise, or delete policies as recommended, and these are local policies, by TASB Policy Service and according to the instruction sheet for TASB Localized Policy Manual Update 103, with revisions to the following policies. So changes to BF Local Board Policies, CAA Local Fiscal Management Goals and Objectives, Financial Ethics, CO Local Food Services Management, GRA Local Relations with Governmental Entities, State and Local Government Authorities. So we update legal policies, regulations, and exhibits, and they are included for your review.
All right, thank you. As the board members have already reviewed these, is there a motion on the table?
I move that the board add, revise, or delete local policies as recommended by TASB Policy Service and according to the instruction sheet for TASB Localized Policy Manual Update 103, with revisions as noted to the following policies: BF Local Board Policies, CAA Local Fiscal Management Goals and Objectives, Financial Ethics, CO Local Food Services Management, GRA Local Relations with Governmental Entities, State and Local Governmental Authorities.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? Second. All right, Marilyn seconded. Any discussion about the update 103? All right, I'll call for a vote. All of those in favor of the motion on the table, please raise your hand. And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you
Oliver.
all so much.
All right, and then agenda item 13 would be the 15-minute public comment session on non-agenda items. Do we have any speakers?
We do not, thank you.
All right, thank you. Then all of the business is concluded, and I adjourn the meeting at 9:02.